Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. We are going through Kahlil Gibran's The Prophet, and we are on laws here. So we're going to have two readings, and then we're going to discuss this piece. Then we'll go to the next piece. We'll have two readings, discuss those pieces. So we're going to start with Jyoti, followed by Joe as the readers. For the first one. Jyoti, go ahead.
Then a lawyer said, "But what of our laws, master?" And he answered, "You delight in laying down laws, yet you delight more in breaking them, like children playing by the ocean who build sand towers with constancy and Oh, I got muted. Okay. Sorry. You delight in laying down laws, yet you delight more in breaking them, like children playing by the ocean who build sand towers with constancy and then destroy them with laughter. But while you build your sand towers, the ocean brings more sand to the shore. And when you destroy them, the ocean laughs with you. Verily, the ocean laughs always with the innocent. But while you build, is something wrong here? But what about those to whom life is not an ocean and man-made laws are not sand towers, but to whom life is a rock and the law is a chisel with which they would carve it in their own likeness? What of the cripple who hates dancers? What of the ox who loves his yoke and deems the elk and deer of the forest stray and vagrant things? What of the old serpent who cannot shed his skin and calls all others naked and shameless? And of him who comes early to the wedding feast and then overfed and tired goes his ways, saying that all feasts are violation and all feasters lawbreakers? What shall I say of these, save that they too stand in the sunlight, but what with their backs to the sun? They see only their shadows, and their shadows are their laws. And what is the sun to them but a caster of shadows? And what is it to acknowledge the laws but to swoop down and trace their shadows upon the earth? But you who walk facing the sun, what images drawn on the earth can hold you? You who travel with the wind, what weather vane shall direct your course? What man's law shall bind you if you break your yoke, but upon no man's prison door? What laws shall you fear if you dance, but stumble against no man's iron chains? And who is he? What shall bring you to judgment if you tear off your garment, yet leave it in no man's path? People of Orphalese, you can muffle the drum and you can loosen the strings of the lyre. But who shall command the skylark not to sing?
Next up is Joe.
Then a lawyer said, "But what of our laws, master?" And he answered, "You delight in laying down laws, yet you delight more in breaking them, like children playing by the ocean who build sand towers with consistency and then destroy them with laughter. But while you build your sand towers, the ocean brings more sand to the shore. And when you destroy them, the ocean laughs with you. Verily, the ocean laughs always with the innocent. But what of those to whom life is not an ocean, and man-made laws are not sand towers, but to whom life is a rock, and the law a chisel with which they would carve it in their own likeness. What of the cripple who hates dancers? What of the ox who loves his yoke and deems the elk and deer of the forest stray and very vagrant things? What of the old serpent who cannot shed his skin and calls all others naked and shameless? And of him who comes early to the wedding feast, and when overfed and tired goes his way, saying that all feasts are violation and all feasters lawbreakers? What shall I say of these save that they too stand in the sunlight, but with their backs to the sun? They see only their shadows, and their shadows are their laws. And what is the sun to them but a caster of shadows? And what is it to acknowledge the laws but to stoop down and trace their shadows upon the earth? But you who walk facing the sun, what images drawn on the earth can hold you? You who travel with the wind, what weather vane shall direct your course? What man's law shall blind you if you break your yoke, but upon no man's prison door? What laws shall you fear if you dance, but stumble against no man's iron chains? And who is he that shall bring you to the judgment if you tear off your garment, yet leave it in no man's path? People of Oriphalese, you can muffle the drum, and you can loosen the strings of the lyre. But who shall command the skylark not to sing?
Right. Thank you, folks. All right, now time for comments on this piece. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to comment. First up is Allison.
Oh, I was actually raising my hand to read.
That's fine. You can read next time, but if you have comments, you're welcome to comment.
Not really. I mean, it's really beautiful just listening to it. I don't really understand that much about it yet. Okay. But the words are really lovely though.
Okay, thank you. Next up is going to be Yulia. Yulia, go ahead.
Hey, you guys must have much more context for this one, having gone through Crime and Punishment before, because I didn't finish that chapter. I'm just wondering, you know, what do you think about this idea where there's kind of, I mean, surely there are laws that are meant to protect the vulnerable from those who are more powerful. And there are ways of breaking laws that aren't just about your own freedom, but are about harming and hurting other people. I don't know if you guys just discussed this before with the previous chapter.
Thank you, Yulia. Folks, if you'd like to just make a comment or you would like to address what Yulia said, you're welcome to do that. You can do any combination of the above. Next up is going to be Maritza.
I do want to address that because it's an interesting thing. So I tend to think that all of the poems in the Prophet could stand alone, but you know, Yulia just pointed out that there is value in looking at this one with the previous chapter. Now, according to the previous poem for Crime and Punishment, Gibran told us that what he was trying to point out is that we should understand that you know, the erect and the falling are but one man standing in twilight between the night of his pygmy self and the day of his God self. And then he basically says, you know, he says the cornerstone of the temple is not higher than the lowest stone in its foundation. So in other words, it's a community-centric view of you cannot look at someone who's committed a crime and just banish them from your thoughts, your sights, your community without seeking the question, what does that do to the community and what blame has the community to take in this person's committing of the crime? So when we think of that, looking, going next towards laws, what I see here, and I hadn't realized until Julia pointed it out, that I am, picking up upon from the previous poem, that he's not saying do away with all laws. He's saying, again, any strong statements to one side or the other that lays in foul or folly, as it were. Like, I really love the that he says, the fact that he said, and he does say, man-made laws are not sand towers. So to me, that means he's saying that they can be mainstays of our living. And then he goes on, though, to caution that they should also not be rocks. And so I think he's saying we need to find somewhere in between balance. We should not have laws of sand that could be so easily blown away, but we also don't want them chiseled in rock so that they're so rigid that there's no room for growth or evolution. And the last line to this poem is, he asks, who shall command the skylark not to sing? And to me, that is a beautiful call to remind us that no law of man should supersede the laws of nature. And that's just my impressions of this poem. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Jyoti. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, there is that element of individual freedom versus the idea of obeying laws. But I also think there's, when he talks about what of the old serpent who cannot shed his skin and calls all others naked and shameless, and him who comes early to the wedding feast and when overfed and tired goes his way, saying that all feasts are violation of all feasters, law breakers. I think that that's interesting as well. I think in a sense that it's about judgment within that framework. So be careful of moral judgment, the moral judgments that you make, and the hypocrisy that exists within that. So then you're within the system too. He's talking about, as Maritza alluded to, the laws themselves, but also the people and how they actually interact with the law. And so, that's, I think, is an important part.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Jyoti.
Yeah, I think Maritza and Joe did a good job in explaining. My take on this is that there should be laws, but be careful with the strict laws because sometimes they impede or impair the fun and laughter. When things are going fine, when everything is smooth, you don't need the laws. You have to be careful with that. But however, that is not to say that the laws should not be there, because they do regulate the environment, the behavior, and what have you. So laws should not be like just laid down for the sake of laying down. That's my take on this. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jyoti. Now, Nalini wanted to play a video for us, a short video about Gibran. So, Nalini, can you go ahead? I've enabled sharing. Can you go ahead and click on share screen and play the video?
Mute and play it from mine?
Yes, because I don't have it.
Okay. I send it to you on your text message
on the
because I
text.
couldn't copy the link.
Sure.
So
That's
I
fine.
apologize for.
Yeah. Can you play it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just wanted to tell you that it's not in the sequence. We are doing the different poems. I came across this and it touched my heart. It's actually about death and the river. And these are the two lines that just, I don't know how to express it. If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide unto the body of life, for life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. And then I'm just going to play the video and hopefully it will work.
She has traveled from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages. And in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will the fear disappear, because that's where the river will know. It's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean, I think this is worth repeating because that's where the river will know. It's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. Kahlil Gibran. Friends, don't be scared when death knocks at your door, because what seems like the end of a journey is an act of merging back with the Supreme Source from where we all originated. And no one can escape that. No one can go back. So don't be scared and don't be too attached to your worldly accomplishments and possessions. And you don't even have to wait for death to achieve this state of oneness and detachment. You can practice what Dr. Wayne Dyer often referred to as dying while you're still alive. Dying while you're still alive. Practicing detachment and merging your identity and your ego with the Supreme Source. And then, as it's written in the Bhagavad Gita, everything will be yours and you will belong to everyone. Everything will be yours and you will belong to everyone. I leave you with this profound thought from the Indian Hindu saint and religious leader, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, who wrote, "Spirituality automatically leads to humility. Spirituality automatically leads to humility. When a flower develops into a fruit, the petals drop off on their own. And when one becomes spiritual, the ego vanishes gradually on its own. A tree laden with fruit always bends low. Humility is a sign of greatness. Humility is a sign of greatness." Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa. Don't forget, friends, when entering the ocean, upon entering the ocean, the river is not losing its identity. It's rejoining its source, and it's now transforming into the mighty ocean. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
I hope everybody could hear it.
Yes.
It was just so profound to me. I have read it, I don't know, maybe 50 times after I saw this video. And it reminded me of something that happened in 2019. I was in Goa. And I was with my sister and brother-in-law. And we saw the two rivers merge into the ocean. And there were three three colors, three shades of blue, one with green, one with a little bit darker, and then of course the ocean. I actually stood there and just took it in. And I still can see all the different shades of blue, the way they merge into the ocean. Also at a midpoint, you could see the river, kind of the waves going back and the ocean trying to take them and merge them into one. I think I will never forget that. And that is something that my younger son taught me a long time ago. We were standing at the Golden Gate Bridge and he was watching the sunset. And I saw him, the way he was watching it, but I tried to, I think, interrupt him. And I said, Tarun, and he said, Mom, let me enjoy this. Let me soak it in. And let me always, always remember this. And I think we call it mindfulness today, but that was about 20 years ago when he was young. And I just wanted to share this with you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lily.
Thank you, Rishirikant, to let me play this. I know it was not in the sequence, but I just wanted to
this was
play it for
beautiful, and it was perfectly in what we are doing, in tune with what we are doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Maritza, would you like to go ahead and take over the moderating?
Okay. Yes. So we're going to move on to freedom, actually. After that, I second the thank you for sharing that. So I have, if you would like to read, please type an R in the chat, and to message. So I'm going to do Allison and then Evanique for 2 readings of freedom. And then what we'll do is when you want to make comments, you'll type in exclamation marks. All right, here is the thing. So Allison,
Okay.
go ahead, please.
And an orator said, "Speak to us of freedom." And he answered, "At the city gate and by your fireside, I have seen you prostrate yourself and worship your own freedom, even as slaves humble themselves before a tyrant and praise him, though he slays them. In the grove of the temple and in the shadow of the citadel, I have seen the freest among you wear their freedom as a yoke and a handcuff. And my heart bled within me, for you can only be free when even the desire of seeking freedom becomes a harness to you, and when you cease to speak of freedom as a goal and a fulfillment. You shall be free indeed when your days are not without a care, nor your 54 nights without a want and a grief, but rather when these things girdle your life, and yet you rise above them naked and unbound. And how shall you rise beyond your days and nights unless you break the chains which you at dawn of your understanding have fastened around your noon hour? In truth, that which you call freedom is the strongest of these chains, though its links glitter in the sun and dazzle your eyes. And what is it but fragments of your own self you would discard that you may become free? If it is an unjust law, you would abolish that law was written with your own hand upon your own forehead. You cannot erase it by burning your law books, nor by washing the foreheads of your judges, though you pour the sea upon them. And if it is a despot you would dethrone, see first that his throne erected within you is destroyed. For how can a tyrant rule the free and the proud, but for a tyranny in their own freedom and a shame in their own pride? And if it is a care you would cast off, that care has been chosen by you rather than imposed upon you. And if it is a fear you would dispel, that seat of that fear is in your heart and not in the hand of the feared. Verily, all things move within your being in constant half embrace, the desired and the dreaded, the repugnant and the cherished, the pursued and that which you would escape. These, one second. These things move within you as lights and shadows in pairs that cling. And when the shadow fades and there is no more, the light that lingers becomes a shadow to another light. And thus your freedom, when it loses its fetters, becomes itself the fetter of a greater freedom.
Now, Avanique, for our second reading. And an orator said, "Speak to us of freedom." And he answered, "At the city gate and by your fireside, I have seen you prostrate yourself and worship your own freedom. Even as slaves humble themselves before a tyrant and praise him though he slays them, I, in the grove of the temple and in the shadows of the citadel, I have seen the freest among you wear their freedom as a yoke and a handcuff. And my heart bled within me, for you can only be free whenever when even the desire of seeking freedom becomes a harness to you, and when you cease to speak of freedom as a goal and a fulfillment. You shall be free indeed when your days are not without a care, nor your nights without a want and a grief, but rather these things girdle your life, and yet you rise above them naked and unbound. How shall you rise beyond your days and nights unless you break the chains which you at the dawn of your understanding have fastened around your noon hour? In truth, that which you call freedom is the strongest of those chains, even though links glitter in the sun and dazzle your eyes. And what is it but fragments of your own self would discard that you may become free? If it is an unjust law, you would abolish it. That law was written with your own hands upon your own forehead. You cannot erase it by burning your law books, nor by washing the foreheads of your judges, though you pour the sea upon them. And if it is the deepest, you would dethrone, see first that his throne erected within you is destroyed. For how can a tyrant rule the free and the proud, but for a tyranny in their own freedom and a shame in their own pride? And if it is a care you would cast off, that care has been chosen by you rather than imposed on you. And if it is fear you would dispel, the seat of that fear in your heart and not in the hand of the feared. Verily, all things move within your being in constant half embrace, and the desired and the dreaded, the repugnant and the cherished, the pursued and that which you would escape. These things move within you as lights and shadows and pain These things move within you as lights and shadows in pairs that cling. And when the shadows fade and is no more, the light that lingers becomes a shadow to another light. And thus your freedom, when it loses its fetters, becomes itself a fetter of the greatest freedom. Thank you to both Avanique and Allison. Folks, if you would like to comment on these poem lines, please type an exclamation mark. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Any lines that spoke to you, your take on what you think was being said here. First up, I have Avanique. Go ahead, Avanique.
Yeah, I like this poem because I think it actually relates to the video that Nalini was talking about, like that Nalini had
just had us listen to. I think freedom, if you're like freedom being a yoke, because if you're worried about freedom or people taking away your freedom, or people infringing on your freedom, then it becomes the thing you obsess over, and then that becomes your very prison. There's been talk, when you hear about people in prison themselves, like in physical prison for a crime that they've committed, you'll notice that they have freedom once they forgive and let go, and forgive themselves of what they've done, and they just try to make their lives better in the prison. They don't even worry about freedom. They just worry about becoming the best self that they can be, no matter what the circumstances. And in that, they find true freedom. And then we have people that are totally free out in the world, can do what they want, and they're not free because they're trying to hold on to what they think freedom is, which is like doing whatever they want, going wherever they want, pursuing whatever they want. And they're like focused on like getting something, like they're trying to get something instead of like living their life. And that to me is a prison, because when you get locked into trying to get something like a physical thing, that's what locks you in. And I think in this poem, what he's talking about is that freedom becoming that physical thing that they're trying to hold on to. It's like this idea that they have of freedom, but it's not true freedom, because they keep trying to pursue it, and freedom doesn't get pursued. It just is.
Thank you, Evanique. Would anyone else like to comment on this poem? Next up, I have Yulia. Go ahead, Yulia.
Hey, Veronique, I love what you just said. And it reminded me kind of this paradox that happens when you seek enlightenment as well. When you seek nirvana, you have to kind of simultaneously seek it and not seek it, right? Because the actual desire to be desireless is itself a desire. So that kind of, I don't know, it made me think of it because it seems like a very kind of paradoxical thing that freedom should be a yoke. I wonder what everyone else thinks of that.
That's a very interesting point. And I can see that. That's exactly what it sounds to me like, the poet is saying in this passage. So thank you. Thanks for that, Yulia. Next up, I have Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, one line. I'm looking for it that actually. I think it's in truth that which you call freedom is the strongest of these chains, though its links glitter in the sun and dazzle your eyes. And what is it but fragments of your own self you would discard that you may become free? I think in the actual paragraph before even before the one I just read, what there is more of an emotional freedom that exists in addition to the personal freedom that he's talking about within this. So I find that, yes, if we can be free both through laws and under a tyrant, but we can also be free, or it's also talking about a freedom that we have from our emotions itself.
Thank you, Joe. That is one of my favorite passages in this poem as well. Next up, I have Allison, then Nalini, and then Yoti. Go ahead, Allison.
I can't find the exact passage, but I think it's the one that Evanique was talking about, where, the whole idea that about the freedom coming from yourself, because I feel like sometimes people can take away your freedom, but, or maybe someone's torturing you in some way, or whatever, they're harming you in some way. But the bigger danger is not, when that ends, is that you carrying it within you. It's kind of like, almost like people who come home from a war, and then, some people come home from a war and they go on and live their lives, but some people come home from a war and then they have PTSD for the next 60 years, and that they're carrying it within them. And the fact that they're carrying it within them almost becomes greater than the 2 years that they spent in war. So, something about like what Evanique was saying about you learning to forgive yourself. I had a really interesting Uber driver recently. And I don't know, we got into this great conversation about the Bible and about philosophy. And I don't know what he's done in his life or whatever, but he was talking about how the hardest thing for him was learning how to forgive himself. And that, and so I think that's like where it kind of connects in with people who've been through any sort of traumatic situation. If they can't let go of it, then they're just allowing whatever the situation is to continue for far more years than it would have, in actual real life, because it's continuing inside their own heads. Yeah.
That's a fascinating aspect. I had not seen that, but as you describe it, I can totally see how that would fit right in with a lot of the things that are being said in the poem. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Next up, I have Nalini. Go ahead, Nalini.
Hi, I have 2 questions. One is for Yulia when she talked about nirvana. And I didn't write it down, but she said something. It's when you're trying to get nirvana or you reach nirvana and you don't. And I just wanted her to explain a little bit about that.
I just meant that when you're trying to pursue this desireless state, but that pursuit itself is a desire. So it seems like you have to kind of forget that you're in pursuit of it in order to achieve it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Yulia.
Thank you.
And the other, the lines that I loved in this poem, these things move within you as lights and shadows and pairs that cling. You cannot basically separate those 2 things. When the shadow fades and is no more, the light that lingers becomes a shadow to another light. I thought it was so beautiful because that's, to me, when you're standing outside and you look at the light and shadow, it's like a beautiful dance between the 2. And you cannot really separate the 2 because you move and then it becomes, even when you're standing outside in the sun and you have the shadow, you move, and that shadow takes place of the other shadow and another light. So for me, it was just a beautiful dance which you cannot separate. And thus your freedom, when it loses its fetters, the chains, it becomes itself the fetter of the greater freedom. So I did like that very much. And thank you, all of you, for explaining some of the things that I didn't understand, all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Nalini. Next up, I have Jyoti. Go ahead, Jyoti.
Hi. I was just going to read this one more time. I found it very touching. And my heart bled within me. For you can only be free when even the desire of seeking freedom becomes a harness to you. And when you cease to speak of freedom as a goal and a fulfillment, basically what Maritza said, that when it becomes an obsession, your goal, your desire to be free, when it becomes an obsession, that's when you're losing freedom. And I think this paragraph is very touching, the way it has been worded. And that's what I was going to say. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoti. I'm noticing that almost in every poem of Gibran's that we've read here for the Prophet, there's this entity towards moderation interwoven in all of them. And that's what I'm hearing that you pointed out a little bit there. Thank you. Next up, I have Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I actually found the line that made me actually think about the emotional state. I was looking for it previously, and it was that you shall be free indeed when your days are not without a care, nor your nights without a want and a grief. So that's where I was actually talking about the emotional freedom. That was, I was looking at several different lines, but that was the paragraph I was searching for when I first heard it. So anyway, just a point of clarification.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I see, the line that Joe read and the lines that Jyoti read, they're very striking to me as well. That which you call freedom is the strongest of these chains. And I think that that's interesting, and it causes one to consider whether or not there are aspects within our lives where we need to, check and see if that which is glittery and dazzling might actually be a shackle. And so that's just a thought that came to my mind when listening to those poems there. And I don't know, it's very like emotive, the idea of, not being able to catch freedom by aiming towards it. It makes me think of something I've said often about the idea or the concept of happiness, and that others have said, actually, I totally stole this from some philosopher, the idea that, the surest way to never find happiness is to aim straight for it, right? So it's believed that happiness should be a byproduct of walking that meaningful path. And I almost feel like we can hear tendrils of that here in the concept of freedom, that maybe freedom should be something that we find ourselves in almost by happenstance. If we're doing our forward moving path, seeking that meaningful path for ourselves, hopefully when you're there and as you're walking along it, there will be freedom found along the way, but it'll almost be like, oh, okay. Instead of it being something that we're actively seeking, it'll be something that we will find ourselves among because of that forward movement that we're, intentionally doing or making. So yes, those were just my two thoughts on this poem. We can move on to the next one. Thank you, Yulia. So the next ones are reason and passion. And I have to say, I'm interested in how they are put together. So type in an R if you would like to read. I have Joe. Joe and Yulia. So first up, I'm going to go with Joe. Let me put the share screen up for you. Okay, Joe, go.
And the priestess spoke again and said, "Speak to us of reason and passion." And he answered, saying, "Your soul is oftentimes a battlefield upon which your reason and your judgment wage war against your passion and your appetite. Would that I could be the peacemaker in your soul, that I might turn the discord and the rivalry of your elements into oneness and melody. But how shall I, unless you yourselves be also the peacemakers, nay, the lovers of all your elements? Your reason and your passion are the rudder and the sails of your surfing soul. If either your sails or your rudder be broken, you can but toss adrift and drift, or else be held at the standstill in mid-seas. For reason, there you go. For reason, ruling alone is a force confining, and passion, unattended, is a flame that burns to its own destruction. Therefore, let your soul exalt your reason to the height of passion, that it may sing, and let it direct your passion with reason, that your passion may live through its own daily resurrection, and like the phoenix rise above its own ashes. I would have you consider your judgment and your appetite, even as you would two loved guests in your house. Surely you would not honor one guest above the other. For he who is more mindful of one loses the love and the faith of both. Among the hills, when you sit in the cool shade of the white poplars, sharing the peace and serenity of distant fields and meadows, then let your heart say in silence, God rests in reason. And when the storm comes and the mighty wind shakes the forest, and the thunder and lightning proclaim the majesty of the sky, then let your heart say in all, God moves in passion. And since you are a breath in God's sphere, and a leaf in God's forest, you too should rest in reason and move in passion.
And now the second reading by Yulia.
And the priestess spoke again and said, "Speak to us of a reason and passion." And he answered, saying, "Your soul is oftentimes a battlefield upon which your reason and your judgment wage war against your passion and your appetite. Would that I could be the peacemaker in your soul, that I might turn the discord and the rivalry of your elements into oneness and melody. But how shall I, unless you yourselves be also the peacemakers, nay, the lovers of all your elements? Your reason and your passion are the rudder and the sails of your seafaring soul. If either your sails or your rudder be broken, you can but toss and drift, or else be held at a standstill in mid-seas. For reason, ruling alone, is a force confining, and passion, unattended, is a flame that burns to its own destruction. Therefore, let your soul exalt your reason to the height of passion, that it may sing, and let it direct your passion with reason, that your passion may live through its own daily resurrection, and like the phoenix rise above its own ashes. I would have you consider your judgment and your appetite, even as you would two loved guests in your house. Surely you would not honor one guest above the other, for he who is more mindful of one loses the love and the faith of both. Among the hills, when you sit in the cool shade of the white poplars, sharing the peace and serenity of distant fields and meadows, then let your heart say in silence, God rests in reason. And when the storm comes and the mighty wind shakes the forest, and thunder and lightning proclaim the majesty of the sky, let your heart say in awe, God moves in passion. And since you are a breath in God's sphere and a leaf in God's forest, you too should rest in reason and move in passion.
Thank you. Thank you to Joe and Yulia for this reading of this poem. Please type in exclamation if you'd like to comment on this poem. And you can type an R if you wanted to read. I will, while you guys are collecting your thoughts, I will chat a little bit about this poem. I think it's just undescribably beautiful. There are so many beautiful, just beautiful passages. I think the yes and, the concept of embracing the yes and that we have spoken about together here in other forums is so like shining vibrantly throughout this poem. The idea of it doesn't have to be just one. In fact, it should not be one. It must be two. You know, there's the yin and the yang, the chaos and order aspects of this reason and passion. And Gibran just sketches that out for us just beautifully. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, it is a balance. For reason ruling alone is a force confining, and passion unattended is a flame that burns to its own destruction. That just shows you that how they need to necessarily work together. And even in the opening line, how it is interesting that how he pits them almost against one another, in the sense in that when he says, your soul's often a battlefield upon which your reason and your judgment wage war against your passion and your appetite. And I think that that's actually interesting in that sense, that you're talking about you're talking about a form of temperance, essentially, but also just the words that are being used, they wage war. I guess it's this regulating mechanism against your desires. That being said, desires still have a important role. And he talks about that with your reason and your passion are the rudder and the sails of your seafaring soul. And so that line there is actually essentially saying how they work together. And using the metaphor of a sailboat, which is interesting in and of itself. But I think that this is talking about balance the whole time. But at certain times, he does talk about how they're kind of pitted against one another, or regulate one another.
Thanks, Joe. I want to comment, but I'd love to hear what Jyoti has to say first. Go ahead, Jyoti.
I was talking to myself because I was on mute. I lost the page. But what I was going to say was, it seems to me like there's a struggle between the conscience and the desire and the passion. The conscience is on one side and desire and passion on the other side. And who's going to win? And sometimes there's a synchrony, there's a balance between the two, and other times they're all going in different directions. And then they all come back. Then there's a reason for it. And then there's to satisfy yourself, you have a passion. That's how I'm looking at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. Next up, I have Allison. Hi.
I love the image of the sailboat, because I really, there's something so magnificent about watching the air go into the sail, and it's just billowing. And, it's like passion. But on the other hand, you do need that rudder to sort of guide that passion in the right direction. And, it's like, if you let, desire just, it's like if someone's in a marriage and the desire just lets them in there cheating with everybody that comes around, then that, that desire is not being sent in the right direction. But if the rudder is guiding it so that that passion is focused on your partner, then that's the thing that's really keeping the relationship going for many years. So it's just such a really beautiful image. I really, I feel like I'm going to be thinking about that every time I see a sailboat now.
That's great. That is pretty great. I like it. To me, it does also, that image solidifies for us the idea of them, in fact, working together. And working together is the most productive, in fact, the proper way in which they should operate. Yes? Because if they start going opposite, you'll see what will happen to that sailboat. Yes? So I like that imagery is great because it's like it solidifies for you the idea that we're not talking about opposing forces. We're talking about forces that should be complementary and guiding, and it's just beautiful. I it's interesting. So I wanted to, Joe read the idea about your soul is oftentimes a battlefield upon which your reason and your judgment wage war against your passion and your appetite. And interestingly enough, I get the feeling that he's not pointing that out to tell us about a contradiction. I feel, at least to my, the way I'm hearing it, it sounds like what he's saying is that this is a natural state of being for a soul, for a person, because, in the next line, he says, would that I could be the pacemaker, I'm sorry, peacemaker in your soul, that I might turn the discord and the rivalry of your elements into oneness and melody. And what he's saying to you is, but it's not for me, it's for you. And the phrase he uses a little bit down, he says, you have to be the peacemaker and the lover of all your elements. And to me, it seems that that's the only reason he points out the inner potential disharmony, or because really, we have to remember that both chaos and order, those are natural occurring. That's nature. And you can't have one without the other. I think that that's what he's pointing out to us. But then he's saying they exist, but there's no need for them to take over. You are the one who can be the peacemaker. And I love that he says that the way that we can, do this in harmony dance that the rudder and the sails do in the sailboat is by loving all of our elements. And I think that's just beautiful. The idea of, and if you go back to the sailboat, it does sound kind of silly to be like angry at your sails because they're not doing what you want them to do. If you're just be pleased with your sail, even when it's not necessarily doing exactly what you want, you might have a better experience underwater. So yeah, I kind of viewed it that way. Like it was just this reminder to us that there's, we can be the rulers of this perceived potential discord, or this naturally occurring discord within us. And I really like that. I agree with Joe that there's a lot of intonations here about balance, but also, again, as I said before, I see very prevalently in this poem, again, the entity for moderation. It's like, how does one find balance except from failing to go too far this way or too far this way? We kind of hover closer to the middle. So Joe is saying that temperance is self-restraint and moderation in all aspects of life. Absolutely. I would agree.
That's what I was saying. It was temperance. That first opening paragraph is that the way I saw it was temperance.
I would definitely agree with that. Thank you, Joe. Next up, I have Evanique. Go ahead, Evanique.
Oddly enough, when you were talking, Marissa, I was also I agree with temperance and moderation part, but I also get a sense of flow, like getting in that flow state. It's um oh gosh, I was just listening to it was one of the I was looking at a video and the person was talking about focus and that, like you kind of have to have tunnel vision when you're trying to work on something because and like cut out everything that doesn't go along with that in order to achieve that particular goal. And I was thinking of flow state, like when we did the book Flow, it's like you get into your flow state and nothing, and like everything else kind of like drifts away in a sense. And so I think I almost feel like if you're trying to be like, it's kind of like the poem before about freedom. If you're trying to pursue freedom, you don't get it. If you're trying to pursue temperance, you don't get it. But I think if you're focused on being a person of temperance and you are like you're not obsessing over it and it's not like you know it's not taking over your world, but you're just trying to like incorporate it in your everyday life. I think you achieve it. But when that's all you're trying to do and you're focusing on that instead of like focusing on the goal that you want or what you're trying to achieve, like asking yourself, why does one want temperance? Why do I want temperance? What will that bring? Like Allison was saying, you can have passion, but if you have passion unbridled, it goes astray. What is your goal? I think if you focus on your goal and temperance will get you there, that's when you get temperance. But if you're just like focused for temperance sake, it could be it could control you as well, and not in a good way, because you never allow yourself to really have the joy of life if all you're trying to do is be temperate. So that's what I thought about in that flow state. Kind of just entered. It just kind of happens when you're focused on your goal, and then all of a sudden you realize temperance helps. So you bring in temperance and you bring in desire, because desire will help you strive through when things aren't going your way. Or you bring in passion and freedom. You give yourself freedom to make mistakes. You give yourself passion. That way you can see why was I working towards this goal again? Like, why am I doing all this? You know, like people who are successful, people think, oh, they just got it automatically. No, there were years and years of work and temperance and all of these things that we're talking about in these poems tonight that got them. So I think the focus, should be on your goal and not like a specific thing like freedom or passion or temperance. So those were my thoughts.
Thank you, Evanique. I can see that. In fact, I actually see it. I'm loving that you brought that up as working also for the idea of freedom, going off of what Yulia was saying, that, when you're trying to, desire not to have any desires, but in doing so, you failed because you desired to not have any desires. And the beauty of flow state is that when you're in that sweet spot, there is no desire. There is no, like nothing, everything melts away. There's almost no awareness. And in that sweet spot is where growth happens. So I love that you brought that up, because it gives me food for thought. Thank you. Next up, I have Nalini. Go ahead, Nalini.
Hi. Yes. I think, Avnik, that was very beautiful. The way I look at it is also that even though they are kind of two opposite things, there should be a harmony, and they should come together instead of trying to get rid of them, try to work it out. And I think Allison gave a beautiful image of us, the sails and the rudder, because the sails, to me, flying with the wind is the passion, but then rudder is the one which gives it the direction. So that kind of the combination of both actually is important. So we don't have to get rid of either one of them, but try to have a harmony and love and bring it together. That's my take on it.
Thank you. Thanks, Nalini. Yes, that is great imagery. And, since we're speaking of imagery, how about that last line?
Yes, exactly.
Cleanse.
That
yes,
is, to me, yes, I agree with you. That was the line that spoke to me. It was so beautiful, I thought, when it says, and since you are a breath in God's sphere and a leaf in God's forest, you too should rest in reason and move in passion. And that's the harmony that I was a little bit talking about. So thank you, Maritza, because that's the line that I had actually highlighted because I loved it so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reading it because I did want it to be read again, and that was lovely. Yeah, you rest in reason and move in passion. And that again, that points to, the imagery that Allison so eloquently presented us, it just, I love it because it really does a great job of showing that harmony in the movement there. And I like that. And if you break that out and you break it down a little bit more literally, it makes sense that the passion is the more emotion, right? And you're going to move with emotion because, again, movement means you're alive. If you're standing still, you're not living. Movement means you're living, but you're resting in reason. You're not actually standing still. You're pausing. You're considering. It's like the whole, look both ways before going forward. That's what comes to mind to me with the resting aspect of that passage. There's so much in the imagery of this poem. It's just unbelievable. It's great. Would anyone else like to comment on reason and passion? Or are we ready to move on to pain, which is a weird segue? But that's the next one is pain. Shall we say a few more words about reason and passion first? No, I'm seeing none. So I guess
only
we're ready to
live in the world
go ahead,
of
Alice.
you don't go forward like the ship. It's not going to go forward. It needs that sail. Otherwise, it's not going anywhere. So if you spend all your time overthinking everything, you don't make any decisions ever,
So true. Right. It's why you need both. You have to. That's great. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Allison. Okay, so I have Jyoti queued up to do the first reading of Pain. Do you have any takers for the second reading of Pain?
Pain is my friend, so I can talk about it.
Okay, all right, first reading will be Jyoti with her friend, and Ebonique will do the second reading. Let me put this up on the screen for you. Lovely ladies. There you go. And here's Jyoti with the first reading.
And a woman spoke, saying, "Tell us of pain." And he said, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell. That endless, wait, let me read from your screen. I'm reading it from my screen. Hold on. And he said, your pain is the breaking of the shell. That encloses your understanding. Even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun, so must you know pain. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life? Your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of the heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. And you would watch with serenity through the winters of your grief. Much of your pain is self-chosen. It is the bitter portion by which the by which the physician within you heals your sick self. Therefore, trust the physicians and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. For his hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hand of the unseen. And the cup he brings, though it burns your lips, has been fashioned of the clay which the potter has moistened with his own sacred tears.
And now the second reading by Evanik.
And a woman spoke, saying, "Tell us of pain." And he said, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding, even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun. So you must know pain. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life? Your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy, and you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. And you would watch with serenity through the winters of your grief. Much of your pain is self-chosen. It is the bitter portion by which the physician within you heals your sick self. Therefore, trust the physician and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. For his hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hand of the unseen. And the cup he brings, though it burns your lips, has been fashioned of the clay, which the potter has moistened with his own sacred tears.
Thank you to both Yoti and Evanik for reading. Folks, please type in exclamation if you'd like to comment on this poem on pain. First up, I have Evanik. Go ahead, Evanik.
This is beautiful, I think, because it, you can't have joy without pain. I think it's like a painting, and if when I talk to some painters, they will tell you that a like a dark background brings the light out even more. It's like a stark contrast, and they need the darkness to bring out the beauty and the brightness of that paint, like of a shining color. I think in the beginning where it talks about it is the breaking of a shell that encloses you. um it's a growth thing, right? Like that's how you grow. As painful as it is to go through something, it is how you grow. If you think of I think you think of a caterpillar and a butterfly, right? The caterpillar is like one thing, and think about the way it has to turn into a butterfly. It has to kind of break the cocoon, right? It has to break the shell. If it didn't do it, it would just stay a caterpillar. But then you see the beauty in it as it becomes a butterfly, but it has to go through that. Think of childbirth, right? Like, it's a painful thing that the mother has to go through, but they get their child, which is this beautiful thing that they see and, that they love. But it has to go through pain. So I think you have to break through and go through it in order to, get to the growth. And I think, no one likes pain. I mean, pain is not fun, but I think it's needed. And, I don't know if it was this poem or Seneca. I'm getting my meetups confused, but I want to say it's Seneca. And I think it said, if you have joy, pain is in your bed. And if there's pain, joy is like right around the corner. They go together. So as much as no, I'm not a masochist. I don't like pain, but I thought this poem was beautiful because it shows what the pain, like why you're going through the pain. I think that's the hard part, is like remembering when it's painful, remember why you're going through it.
Yes, thank you, Ebonique. You know, you brought to mind for me conversation I recently had with a girlfriend of mine, a friend, and she was you know, she's been on, you know, the bad date after bad date, first time dating thing. You know, we're both similarly aged, and so, you know, the dating pool thing, it's all like crap. And so she's with somebody she's been dating for a little bit, and she's like, I'm so scared because I just don't want to get my heart broken again. So I don't want to really like get too into him. And I told her, that's impossible. Why are you being so silly? I told her, answer me this. Do you want to experience love again? She goes, I do. I told her, well, then you have to accept that you may get your heart broken again. You can't have one without the other. It's impossible. And she's like, oh, I guess I better go think about that. And it just was interesting to me, you know, it's the whole yin yang, guys. We can't get away from balance. Thank you. Thanks, Avanique. Yeah, next up I have Yoti. Go ahead, Yoti.
Okay, I think, Avanik, you were right about Seneca, the letters. The joy and it says joy and sorrow. They sleep in the same bed. When sorrow is sleeping, joy is awake. It's the same thing. The pain you have, if you hit this rock bottom, unless you hit the rock bottom, you don't come out of your pain. So the person has to go through an adversity in order to feel the joy of life. It's the same thing with the pain. So I like this paragraph over here. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life? Your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. It says it all to me. That if your mind is enjoying the wonders, and you will forget about the pain, you will always also enjoy your pain. That's how I'm taking it. So this really is my friend. The pain, every morning I get up with pain, and every afternoon I feel better about the pain. Every afternoon my perception of the pain has already changed, and I'm looking at pain in a different way. And by the time evening comes, my pain is not to be seen anywhere. So, you know, you start accepting certain things in life, and pain becomes less severe. Did I make a point?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. So deep a one that I'm still pondering it, actually. I'm gonna come back around. I'm gonna hear other people's thoughts, but I'm gonna come back to comment there. Thank you, Jyoti. Next up, I have Joe.
Yeah, so for this one, I really like the line that Evanique had called out. Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding, because that is a sense, wisdom. You're starting to experience something where you can appreciate what maybe someone else is going to, if you actually truly understand. If you're appreciating, understanding is at least to a certain degree is understanding the why something happened. And while you won't fully be able to empathize with anyone else because you don't have their experience, you understand what they went through as to why they are what they're going through, because you understand the why. And so I think that that's really kind of the important parts of any kind of suffering, is that you have different ways that you can use it. You can use it to develop an understanding of yourself and others, or it could actually turn in on you, and then that could turn to anger. So that's the other aspect of it. So anyway.
Thank you, Joe. You know, I really like the line that comes after that one. as beautiful as that line is, it's the idea of even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun, so must you know pain. That, speaking of images, right? Think about it. If the fruit doesn't open so that the seed can come out and be planted, not only does that tree not live on, neither does its progeny. And so I think that that's a fascinating imagery. I would like to share the line that most got to me, but first I want to hear from I had Nalini's and then Jyoti. So go ahead, Nalini.
I agree with all of you and what I think Jyoti said. If you have gone into or suffered, and I think all of us in our life at some point go through that phase, whether it's a loss, it's a grief, it's pain, but more than anything else, of course, it's the emotional pain. What I liked also, besides what you just read, Maritza, the stone fruit, that was so beautiful, and what Joe read. Much of your pain is self-chosen. It is a bitter potion by which the physician within you heals your sick self. So you are that Messiah, you are the physician who can take that pain away from yourself. Therefore, trust the physician and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. For his hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hand of the unseen. And the cup he brings, though it burns your lips, has been fashioned of the clay with the potter, has moistened with his own sacred tears. So that's what is within you. Yes, you're going through that pain, but with that comes also, to me, joy. As I have mentioned before, I lost my husband. That sorrow, that pain never goes away. It stays with you. But slowly I learned that I have the beautiful memories and I need to remember those more than anything else to make myself remember the good things, what I had. And I'm very fortunate that I had those memories with him, which we made together. And that, I think, has to come from within for us. For each person, it's a different way of doing it. But I think pain and sorrow and joy, they're all kind of intermingled. And without one, you cannot enjoy or feel the other. That's my take. Thank you.
Thank you, Nalini. I would agree. Of the lines you read, the one line, much of your pain is self-chosen, really took me aback. It was like a felt push at me. And it's even what you're saying, it's the idea of, sure, this is a painful, life-altering thing. And yet, by choosing to embrace the memories fiercely, you, in fact, are choosing how much of the pain to experience in this moment. So it aligns with this idea that much of your pain is self-chosen, because you could only live in the pain and only be stuck in the loop of the loss. And while the pain of the loss is not necessarily going away, by focusing on the beautiful memories lived together, you're finding a way to give yourself a little bit of breathing room from the pain. And so while the pain is not necessarily gone, it might be slightly less felt. And it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, by the way. And it just really does a beautiful job of highlighting that line.
You put it beautifully, Maritza. You put it very beautifully. But that is the truth. That you can live in that pain. You can get up with that pain, spend the entire life living in that pain. But then you have an option to maybe make it a little bit less and rejoice in those beautiful memories that you have. And yeah, thank you. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you. My thanks to you. Next up is Jyoti.
Yeah, I'm going to be the devil's advocate. I think I disagree. The pain is self-chosen. Pain is not self-chosen. It's your perception that is self-chosen. You have the pain, and to say that I picked up the pain, I chose the pain, is not right. You look at the pain in a way that it doesn't harm you or hurt you any longer. That is in your control. You can make that pain very tranquil, very serene, or you can make it very painful. I get up in the morning, I do feel the pain. I'm left alone. And all my life I think about it, I'm going to be alone. You know, my husband was the one who cared for me and thought for me about everything. And I'm going to be, every day I convince myself, that's okay. It's a long road. It might be a long road. You can do it. You're doing it. So the pain, I couldn't have some control over it. But to say that I have chosen that pain, no, I did not choose that pain. And it is how I perceive it. And no matter how evil the situation becomes, my reaction to it is different. As I'm getting more older and I'm facing a lot of challenges by myself, I'm looking at pain differently. And even so, I love my husband, I love my children. I think his death left me some credit, and I had to pick up that credit and move with it rather than just stay in the state of stoic, I can't move. I'm just going to be stuck in this. So that's my take, that I can now change that perception. Thank you.
So, Jyoti, I will say I don't necessarily think that that's a contradiction. I think it's a lovely way to further clarify the concept for us, because I can still see very much relevant and prevalent what Nalini was saying would totally work there if we're looking at as, so if pain is this thing in nature thrust upon us that none of us can escape, and we accept that as fact, well, then it stands to reason that if we're saying a line such as much of your pain is self-chosen, that we would have to consider that for there to be any grain of truth in it, it's not necessarily pain itself, but the perceived pain. And, as Nalini was saying, you can just wallow. And you yourself, Jyoti, was just saying that you choose every day to say to yourself, I'm going to be okay. I can do this. It's a lot, but I can. And just that little bit of affirmation is just this beautiful way of you choosing to embrace something other than the pain, even acknowledging that the pain still walks alongside you. And so I can see that. And I think for me, I probably would take your terminology because I find it to be maybe a little more precise and concise in that it's not the pain itself, but the perception of pain. So my thanks to you for that. Next up, I have Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
You can let Mark go. He hasn't even spoken yet. So,
Yes, sure, no worries. Mark, please go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you, Maritza. It's so enlightening to hear everybody. And I really appreciate what Jyoti was saying about not choosing certain things. And that really made me think that when a loved one passes away, of course, we don't choose that. But since we chose to love in the first place, that brings along with it, in a sense, the expectation of some future loss when someone we know and love will pass away. So maybe in that sense, when we make choices, even for love, we're choosing and resigning ourselves to one day possibly suffer and endure a pain. Thank you.
Interesting thought, Mark. I would have to join that a little. I may circle back to that. First, I have Joe and then Nalini. Go ahead, Joe.
yeah, that actually was an interesting point. I mean, actually, I think Mark, Maritza, you were saying what you were suggesting to your friend, that there's some risk associated with these endeavors. I think that is, that's part of love. So I think it's ultimately, I think it's how you actually, I shouldn't probably say how you view it. I mean, in the sense that, are you going to look back and be happy with the memories that you had? Or are you going to be angry about the time that you didn't get? And I think that that's the choice that people have to make when they lose somebody that's close to them. And I think it's really, it does become, whenever we say that reality must be a certain way and it doesn't turn out that way, that does lead to disappointment and pain.
Thank you, Joe. I have next up Nalini. Go ahead, Nalini.
I will let Evanique, I think she also, I just saw her hand raised. So I will let her speak first because I already spoke, and then I will.
I mean, I spoke too before, so it's up to you.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Evanique.
I just, this thing about choosing pain, I think when you choose not to accept pain is when you're choosing pain. Because not accepting pain makes it even all the more painful, right? So we try to avoid pain. We try to avoid thinking about things. And I think both Jyoti and Nalini made some beautiful points. In their losses, they both chose to accept that the loss was there. And although they dealt with it in different ways, they each saw the beauty in, the whole of what they had. And, I think it was an acceptance of, we're all like, when you get married, marriage is for life. And then you accept, in a sense, you're accepting that one day your spouse is going to pass, right? And that's going to be painful, but you have all the beauty of the memories, and both of them, you have the beauty of raising children together, and you accept the beauty, but you also accept the pain of the loss. And Jyoti said you move on every day, but the pain doesn't go away. You choose to move forward. And I think that's the acceptance. And I think When you don't accept the pain is when you really choose it, because you're choosing to further on the pain by denying it and like not seeing it, knowing in a sense that it's still there. It's still going to be there. But when you accept it and you move forward, you have all the beauty of it. And, no, you wouldn't have chosen to lose your spouse. I agree with Judy. If you had a choice, you wouldn't choose to lose your spouse, especially if you love your spouse. But when you choose marriage, you kind of choose that. And, it's somewhere tucked in the back of your mind, but you choose the joy anyway. It's like the joy and the pain sleeping in the same bed. You have one and then you have the other. They're both going to go together. But the question is the pain worth it? And, if I look at Nalini and, what she described, and look at Jyoti what she described, I would say, yeah. They both showed the beauty of, going through that. And I know they wouldn't probably describe the pain as beautiful, but I see that the telling of their stories that they choose to still love their husbands, even though their husbands have passed, they still choose to love them and still choose to remember them and remember how great they are. They don't remember that one moment that happened when they passed. They choose all the moments that happened before they passed. So I thank you both, Jyoti and Nalini, for sharing that today with us, because that is, I think both of your stories are beautiful. So thank you both for sharing that with us, and it means a lot.
Thank you, Ebony. I know I have Nalini next, but I do want to just very quickly, because of some of the things that Ebony was pointing out, I'd like to mention we had a comment in the chat. And Eleanor says to us, it sounds to me as if we're talking about pain, as if pain itself would be some luxury. And I think that's a very deep statement. And I would say I don't find pain to be a luxury. And I think that Avanique was kind of saying the same, and she said, they'll be sleeping in bed together. It's that, when you accept one, the other one is yoked there. It's, even if it's not immediately felt, it's there. If we accept for every yin, there's a yang, we have to accept that, there's going to be pain, though it's not really a luxury. It's kind of it's a force in nature. And I like what Jyoti said, was that the pain itself is a force outside of our control. How we choose to move forward with the pain is the only thing we can control. And I believe that Nalini said something similar there. And so with that, I invite Nalini, please go ahead.
Jyoti, if I hurt you in any way, first of all, I didn't mean to. I was just reading what Kahlil Gibran wrote, which was much of your pain is self-chosen. And the comment that I made, yes, it has been 8 years since my husband passed away. Every single day, I wake up and I miss him, just like you do. But what I meant to say is, then I realized that I have these beautiful memories. And my children, actually, I have 2 boys, they helped me with that. They said, Mom, you have such beautiful memories of that. You did so many things together which you both loved. Why don't you focus on that and remember those? Pain is not going to go away. Memories are not going to go away. But what I was talking about is what Kahlil Gibran wrote, and to me, it did strike. It did. I loved it, the way he wrote that in this bitter potion, by which the physician within you heals your sick self. So that's what I was talking more about it, that there is this bitter potion, there is pain that you cannot forget, but there is a physician within you which helps you heal that. And it says, therefore, trust the physician and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. For his hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hand of the unseen. I wish I could remember my husband. My husband used to recite Urdu poetry every night before going to bed. And he would read the poetry. I wish I could remember what he used to say about the Messiah putting this ointment on you. And he, in that particular poem, it says that unfortunately, I don't have that. I can't take your pain away. I can only help you with that balm. I have to find that poem, but it was beautiful. And every night I remember that. So I didn't mean to say that it is something that anybody brings upon them, or it's the way, Kahlil Gibran, I think, worded it, but that's what I meant. So I do apologize if in any way I hurt your feelings. That's not what I meant.
Can I say something, Nalini?
Yes, please.
I wasn't talking about what you said. I was talking about Kahlil, that he said that, not you.
Okay.
You were just reading his. Not at all. Please don't apologize. I did not even think about that. I was just saying that what he has written, you choose your pain. I was reacting to that. You didn't. You're not Kahlil Gibran. You were just reading his. Thank you, though. Thank you. Very sweet of you. Thank you.
It's just lovely. I do have Allison up next. Go ahead, Allison.
I want to speak about what Eleanor said about pain being a luxury. And it is. It really is. I mean, I don't in any way mean to minimize the losses that the two of you have been through, but I remember talking to my uncle after my aunt died, and he said to me, he said, you can't begin to imagine the pain that I feel. And I said to him, I said, you are so lucky that you get to experience that. He's like, how is this luck? And I said, you had a very long, very, very happy marriage. And I said, do you know how many people never get to experience that? And I said, you have no idea the pain that some people experience by never getting married at all, or by going through horrendously awful, painful divorces. And I said, the fact that you got to experience this wonderful thing for decades, it's a beautiful thing. And it is a luxury. It is a luxury to be able to have that pain, not to minimize it, and not that it's not painful to go through that. But I mean, I'm really a big person. I really, really believe in focusing on the good things, and that if you are lucky enough to experience that, cherish those memories and cherish that happiness and be grateful for having been able to experience that. And I really do feel like happiness, it is a choice. It's not that you don't get to choose the things that happen to you, but you get to choose what to focus on each day. And, one thing that I always think of, I used to say it to my son all the time when I would drop him off at daycare at the crack of dawn, and the sun was coming up over this hill as I would drive up, and I would tell him to focus on how beautiful the sunrise was. And I said, even if you've had the worst day in the world, look at the sunrise and look at the sunset, because every single day has beauty in it. And so I think that, even when you're going through something difficult, whatever difficulty you're going through, if you just kind of stop and look at the sky and look at the clouds and notice the little things in your life, it kind of puts things in perspective. I remember there's some Woody Allen movie, I don't remember which one it was, but he's like a big hypochondriac, and comes out of the doctor's office. He's convinced he's going to die from whatever it is. And all of a sudden he looks up and he sees the sky and people playing in the park, and, and he's like, oh, that's right. Life is going on, it like snapped him back into like, it's just kind of a sense of balance about everything. So, yeah.
Thank you, Allison. I have Nalini. Go ahead.
Hi, Allison. That was beautiful what you said. And that my son had 2 surgeries, and it took him about 2 weeks to recover from both the surgeries. And the first day I took him out, he saw the sun, the flowers, the trees, the clouds. And that was the first thing he said, Mom, you cannot imagine what it is to be outside, to enjoy the beautiful trees, the flowers. I didn't pay much attention to these things earlier, but today I realize that these things are so important. You always used to say, make the time to smell the roses. And I never understood that, but today I understand what you meant by that and how important it is to have that. So just wanted to, share that with all of you. But Allison, yes, that is so beautiful. So thankful that every day you get up and just look at the sun and, the nature surrounding you, and to be alive, breathe that air. Yes, a lot to be thankful for. Yes.
Thank you, Nalini. Well, guys, we are coming to the end here. So let's wrap up. I think that we will, we obviously we don't have time to read another one. So let's get ourselves wrapped up here. Thank you for attending. If you will just give me a minute or two, I would like to let you know what's happening with 52 Living Ideas for the rest of the week. But know that next week we are doing Gibran again on Tuesday at 8 p.m. So July is the month of Gibran. So we'll be having it every Tuesday in July. Tomorrow we are doing a pilot discussion looking at combining 3 concepts. It's called triangulating, and we're going to tackle 3 Bucky concepts: integrity, trim tab, and precession, all together tomorrow. And we're looking to expand this and do topics on like vastly different topics. We're choosing this because they're kind of similar. So it's our pilot discussion, and then going forward, we're going to branch out and pick Louis Sullivan with the arts, or like a couple different, and it'll be 3 at a time that we'll be discussing. Thursday is Stoic Thursdays. We are still going through Seneca's Moral Letters to Lucilius. Let's see, do we say where we are now? It doesn't say where we are in the books yet at this point. On Friday, we're doing Design Your Life, Fermentation, the Ancient Art of Preserving Food. And these are all on the weekdays. They're 8 p.m. On Saturday at 5 p.m., we have our Asian Philosophies series. We're going through Taoist text, Zhuangzi, and we're on chapter 5, The Evidence of Virtue Complete. On Sunday at 8 p.m., we're doing Future Thinking and Visualizing Possibilities with Kurt McNamara. And our Mondays is Poetry Mondays with me. And then Tuesday is Gibran again. So that's what's coming up. Thank you all for sharing your Tuesday with us. And have a great rest of your evening. Hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye, guys.